lovely to be here, and it's an absolute pleasure to be amongst your presence and presenting to you. My name is Sheb from MindHealth Services, and just before I go into my professional life, I just thought I'd share with you some of my personal achievements. So I'm a rescue scuba diver, I'm a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, been studying the martial arts for 7 years. I've won a couple of awards in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition in Sydney, and I've also won a couple of public speaking competitions as well. I've been part of Toastmasters for the last 2.5 years. Not highly recommended enough, it's been amazing. But these days, you will find me on the beach volleyball courts on the weekends. So I just absolutely love being out in the outdoors in the sun, getting active and healthy and fit. After all, I have to practice what I preach. So, as I said, I'm Sheb from MindHealth Services, and I am having trouble working with this. There we go. So my background comes in from the last 15 years. So 15 years I've been involved in the space of wellness. So I started, my initial business started about 15 years ago as a soft tissue therapist. So I worked in my own business. During that time, I had the privilege of working with the State of Origin team. I was one of their soft tissue therapists. I also was the head of soft tissue for the Sydney 2009 World Masters in the track and field as well. So that was a really lovely experience. However, in that 10 years, while I was working in my own clinic, I found that I needed a little bit more challenge. So I decided to go to the corporate field, and I worked for Suncorp as their injury management advisor. So my job there was to help the case managers as well as work with complex claims. So what I mean by that is claims that have been in workers' comp for 10 plus years. My job was to help offer some guidance and suggestions, especially those that would come across as surgery requests, complex surgery requests. I would liaise with occupational physicians, the medical support panel, which is a board of occupational physicians that do help determine whether the requested surgery for the claimant is reasonable and necessary. So a very high pressure job. I was involved in that for a number of years, so I know very well just the impact that injury has on individuals, not only in the short term, but also in the long term. We're not talking about just physical injuries, we're also talking about mental injuries as well, so psychological injuries. Following that, I also worked as a rehab consultant. So then I went out onto the field. So I worked with my claimants on a face-to-face basis where I attended medical case conferences, dealing with specialists, offering advice, suggestions for a gradual return to work process. So helping my claimants and my clients get back to work in a long-term sustainable fashion by offering suggestions, by offering the best way possible to get these people back to work, back to fit and healthy. So at MindHealth Services, our mission is to work with organisations and individuals towards better health today for tomorrow. Our goal is to deliver a unique approach to wellness solutions by enhancing mind-body awareness from the inside out. And if I may use an example here. So allow this cup of water. So the water in here is the emotions, the thoughts, feelings, any negative experiences you may have been holding on to. What happens in the event that if Cameron was able to approach me and accidentally bumped you? What's the chances of this water spilling? Fairly high, right? This is exactly what happens if we're holding on to a lot of emotions in the body, whether that may be negative thoughts, feelings, thoughts like I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not confident enough, I'm not successful enough. Anybody relate? Therefore, these feelings and emotions can be bottled up in the body, and if not released, can become quite detrimental. It could cause all kinds of illnesses as well as disease. It's when we are not at ease with our body. And it's only a matter of time that we can have a reactive approach versus a responsive approach. Anybody relate? Yeah? Anybody here has flipped the lid on more than one occasion? Right, so imagine holding on to those for a prolonged chronic period. What's happening is that you're living life on a chronic stress environment. So you're living under the hormones of chronic stress. You can have two people working in the same environment, and one person will react to their external stressor in a different way to the other. Why? It all depends on the meaning, also the interpretation. So it relies on our perception, all to do with our level of perception. That level of perception, what happens is if we trigger that external stressor as a threat, the mind releases a chemical, sends a signal down to the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands releases the hormone called what? Adrenaline. Gets you ready for flight-fight response. But if we're living under this hormone for a chronic period of time, what are the chances that we're going to live a better quality of life? What are the chances that we're going to risk any form of injury, whether that might be physical injury or whether that might be psychological injury? So the stakes are pretty high if we don't take a mindful approach. And if we are not mindful of our level of stress, then guess what? We are literally creating a hole for ourselves. And it takes a lot of time for those people that get stuck in that hole to get back out. So what is stress? Anybody here ever been stressed before? I'd be lying too if I said I've never been stressed. The stress is a situation or a trigger that creates a biological response. So when we are stressed, what happens? Our blood pressure goes through the roof. Our heart rate increases. The blood in the glucose in the blood increases. So all of these biological responses tend to happen in the body on a cellular level. And if we are living, as I said, in that flight-fight response for a prolonged period of time, this is where the body begins to create disease. What kind of disease? Autoimmune disease, you name it. Here's an interesting statistics. So between March 2020 and June 21, almost 17.6 million Medicare subsidized mental health related services were processed. Let that sink in. 17.6 million subsidized mental health related services were processed. So this is during a pandemic. This is fairly high. And this is people who have gone to see their doctor, who have said, hey doc, I'm experiencing lack of sleep, I'm experiencing stress, I'm experiencing depression, anxiety, all these kinds of stuff. And have gone and been given some form of pharmaceutical intervention. Okay. One of the things I'd like to bring to your awareness are some of the things listed in this table. So if you are experiencing, or that you know of somebody who's experiencing frequent headaches, frequent sick leaves, sleep disturbances, lack of concentration, or if you're short-tempered, you have any digestive issues, you have lack of job satisfaction, low morale, anxiety, depression, tension, all these things on a chronic basis can relate to all to do with stress. So our level, again, as I was saying, our level of perception, the meaning that we give to those external stresses in our environment. So what we need to do is bring a mindful approach by being aware of those signals. And after all, that's really all they are. They are just red flags, the body just signaling, hey, something is not right here, we need some attention. And why are we living in a society that when we go to see the doctor when something is wrong? Anybody relate to that? Yeah, something is wrong, I'm not feeling right, better go to the doctor. How about we look at some preventative care? I'm going to give you some strategies that I share with my clients, some strategies that could be life-changing. And if you adapt these changes, they could potentially make the difference between having a good day and a bad day, or having a reactive approach versus a responsive approach. So one of the very first things I'd like to share with you is what's called the stop analogy. Has anybody heard of this before? So it's a mindful approach. What it means is, just say you have an external stressor, and it could be your mother-in-law, or it could be the cashier, or the person driving madly beside you. Just say you have an external stressor. Rather than flipping the lid, you could stop. Right? Stop. So the S is stop. Stop what you're doing. The T represents to take a deep breath in. And the moment you begin to take deep and slow breaths, and I notice some people's posture already changing and taking that deep breath in, what you're effectively doing is lowering your blood pressure. You're lowering that heart rate. You're allowing the autonomic nervous system to calm down. So this beautiful mechanism that we have, that we take for granted, our ability to breathe, this amazing lung capacity that we have, can effectively help you bring those stress levels down. And then the O is to observe. Oh, that's interesting. Rather than flipping the lid, you could be curious instead. Would you agree? Well, that's interesting. I wonder why that person reacted that way or responded in the way they did. And then by then what will have happened is that your thinking mind or your rational mind will have caught up to the emotional part of the mind. Now the reason why we get so emotional, we are emotional beings, would you agree? Is that we allow the amygdala, which is the part of the brain, become hijacked. So we become super hypersensitive and hyper-reactive mode. But when we take an approach where we can stop, take a deep breath in and observe and be curious as opposed to being judgmental, we are more likely to allow that thinking part of the brain keep up to the rational part, and then we are then able to proceed, hopefully without any disaster. Now, before anybody jumps out, that Chef, we need stress in our lives. Absolutely. We do need stress in our life because it helps us get out of danger. So we need that flight-fight response. But the only way it becomes a problem is if we hold on to those chronic hormones of stress for a long period of time. That's when it becomes a problem. The other one is physiology. Changing your emotion is motion. The moment we begin to change our body, we begin to change those neurochemicals, biological chemicals in the body, they begin to change. So if you are feeling down, you're stressed out, you're typing away, you're on the phone, change your physiology, all right? Pull your shoulders back, go for a walk, do some squats, burpees, whatever. Change your state. The other is focus. What are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the problems or you're focusing on the solution? Guess what? The more you focus on the problem, guess what? You're going to get more of the problem. But when you shift your mindset towards focusing on a solution, chances are you're going to find the solution to the existing problem. You're going to then look at language. What are the languages that you're telling yourself? I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I don't have the capacity. Being mindful of just all those three, and they can cause a vicious cycle if taking a responsive approach. And following that, we have the power of breath, which is obviously what I shared earlier. So the benefits are, as I mentioned earlier, lowering the heart rate, reducing the levels of chronic stress, which is cortisol, balancing out the levels of oxygen, carbon dioxide through the body. And more than anything, you're going to have an improved immune system. So in the event that your immune system does eventually crash, guess what? You're going to recover a lot quicker because that water in that cup will have reduced. So it's what you're building is resilience, so that that water is not going to tip and you're not going to flip from there. The other thing I'd like to invite you to consider is checking in with yourself every couple of hours throughout the day. Where are my stress levels on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high? If you are at a level 9 or if you are at a level 10, I would encourage you to take those breathing exercises. So start to take in those deep and slow breaths through the nose and do a couple of these, and I will guarantee that your heart rate will reduce, your blood pressure will begin to come down. I love this quote. This quote says, if you realize how powerful your thoughts are, you would never think a negative thought again. Would you agree? Yeah. And I could go on and talk more and more about this, but what I'm going to do instead is invite you to our charity event, which is Saturday week. All these funds are going towards Destiny Rescue, is to help children free them from sexual labour. So if you are around, we'd love to have you come around, or we'd love for you to recommend or refer somebody, where I would dive in a little bit more deeper, having giving you some more tools to take on when dealing with all kinds of stressful potential situations. My colleague who's also presenting will also be providing some self-care strategies as well and coping strategies towards how to live a better quality of life. It's called Reignite Your Entrepreneurial Fire. We would absolutely be delighted if you can make it, but otherwise feel free to refer on. It's an absolute pleasure. I appreciate your attendance. Over to you, Campbell. Thank you.
Thanks, Shep. I think that was sensational.
Yeah.